One of the most profound things I've learned in my life is that it's actually not about my hair at all. I've spent a lifetime trying to cover up who I am. And as much as I love a good external transformation, and I do, I much more love a heart transformation. Join me as I share how I work to heal my heart, find happiness, and embrace our hair. Hey guys, welcome back to It's Not About Your Hair, where we talk all things hair, heart, and happiness. Our last two episodes, we were focused on time, seasons, hurry. And I'm just going to take a right turn and we're going into something else. I think it all kind of plays in together, and I don't particularly know where this comes in, but it's really important to me. And so we're going to go into it. So on today's episode, we're focusing on Jesus. We're going to focus on Jesus. I'm going all in. So if you're not a Christian, I sure hope you'll stick around. If you're curious about who is this Jesus, I hope you'll listen. If you are a Christian, but maybe you don't even know why, or you don't know if you have ever even thought about Jesus, this is going to be awesome. So I have been studying, I'm in a Bible study called BSF, Bible Study Fellowship, and I've been in it for years. And that's aside from my church. It's a group that I meet with and was introduced to it by one of my dearest friends years ago. And this year we're studying the book of John. And this is our Bible study book. So if you're looking, look at this. This is all just the book of John. So deep, so awesome. And we get this big overview picture of the life of Jesus. And so I just am mesmerized how we got here. And I could possibly even offend, I'm sure I will, some of my Christian listeners. And if I do, I would just want to apologize, because that is not my plan. But I need to share what I'm feeling. So I don't know how modern day we have made Jesus who he is, especially here in America. When I read the book of John, the Gospel of John, and I look at the life of Jesus and the love of Jesus, and I think about his beautiful, beautiful example to us, I don't know how any of us are so full of hate, separation, division, arguing. And I know that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And everything that I'm talking about on this podcast last week and from the beginning is based on the foundation that Psalms 139, that I believe that he knew us before he formed us, that he knit us together, which means that you and I were created on purpose for a purpose, and that Jesus' love, life, and death were for you and for me. And how then have we landed in a world that's so divided? Lord have mercy. This is not meant to be political, but it is going to be controversial, because I think Jesus is controversial. I don't know anyone who's ever walked away from faith because of Jesus. If you right now are separated from your faith, I guarantee it's because somebody let you down. Somebody who was religious or a follower of Christ. I know that was my story. I didn't want anything to do with this God after my parents split up and my life took the turn that it took. I decided right then and there that I didn't want anything to do with the God that would let things fall apart. I prayed, I asked for the stuff. The genie in the bottle didn't come out and create the life I wanted, and so I was done with the genie. It would be years before I'd realize that Jesus isn't a genie. That's for Aladdin. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is an opportunity to surrender my life. He is love overflowing. He is forgiveness, restoration, transformation. He is abounding in grace. He is merciful. He is not hate. He is not separation. He is not disappointed in me. He's not leaving me in my sin. He's not waiting for me to mess up. He is waiting with open arms. And the reason that I know that, you guys, so as I studied John for the 100th time, we're walking through the life of Jesus, and particularly the last bit of his life and what he did in his ministry in the 3 years. And it's been so beautiful for me to see how Jesus transitions with the 12 disciples and as he called each of them. So when we think about the disciples, you guys, I get fired up. So The Chosen, I love The Chosen. There's a lot of mixed reviews on that. But if you haven't watched it and you have no idea about this Jesus, watch The Goddamn Chosen. It's so good. And it gives such an accurate, beautiful picture of the fact that the disciples were all a mess, just like you and me. That the people that Jesus called to walk with him were messy, regular people. Simon, temper. Called them the sons of thunder for good reason, I think that there are so many times that we think we have to be cleaned up before God can use us. Or sometimes we don't even want to think about faith because we think we'd have to change our whole lives, but he just takes us as we are. So first, I love that. And then I was thinking about, particularly this week, we were reading about the night before Jesus died. He washed the feet of his disciples. That's a familiar story. If you're not familiar with it, Jesus knew that he was going to die, and he knew what kind of death he was going to die. And he knew that one of his 12 disciples, someone who had walked with him for the last 3 years that he had sown into and loved deeply, was going to betray him. Yet that same night, he chose to wash the feet of all of the disciples, even the one Judas that would betray him and sell him out for money. He also chose to wash the feet of the disciples that he knew would deny him when it came down to them saying whether or not they were a disciple. Jesus already knew that. And he knew and was not all that excited about the path that he was about to take. Yet he chose, even in that, to wash the feet of the disciples. And one of the disciples asked him, Lord, why are you just washing our feet? Maybe I'm paraphrasing. I am dirty, not just my feet. And he said, one who has already been cleansed needs to only wash his feet. And so I think that's such a beautiful thing that we think about, that once we've been asked to be forgiven by Jesus, he makes us clean. You are clean. And then the washing of the feet is an example of the repetitive sins that we choose to do, the things that we struggle with, that he continues, if we're willing to let him make us clean. If we're willing to let him, if we acknowledge our inadequacies, if we're willing to say, Lord, will you meet me here? He does. And he sits with us. And even though he has the right to be served, he serves us. And what an example. So it says in John 13:31, let me go all the way down. He's talking to the disciples. So 13:33, little children, yet a little while I am with you. You will seek me, and just as I said to the Jews, so now I also say to you, where I am going you cannot come. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. He's asking this when he knows that Judas is in the room and Judas is about to betray him, and he still chooses to wash his feet. If you are struggling, have been betrayed or are a betrayer, you can still show love to that person or be loved. Jesus is setting the example. So he's saying, love them, not love just those who are Christians or love those who look like you. He's saying, I don't know who's outside. Love all of those, even those who will betray you. And his example to us is to do it like he did. So he served them. He made himself lowly to be with them. He gave up what he was for them. And he encourages them to do that for one another. And when they fell short and denied him, he forgave them. And it's amazing to me that we live in a world that says Jesus is ashamed of you. Jesus does not want people like you. Jesus is not accepting of that. And we make places that are supposed to be Christian that separate the love of God from people who are looking for the love of God. Yet Jesus' example was, they will know you follow me by the way you love one another. If you love each other as I have loved you. And Jesus' example over and over and over again. I think about the woman at the well, and not the woman at the well, the woman who was an adulteress, and she was to be stoned because that was the custom of the time. So all of the people were there getting ready to stone her, and Jesus stood up with her and calmly said, "He who is without sin cast the first stone." He didn't say, "She's not guilty." He didn't defend her in the sense of justifying her behavior. He just merely created a statement or a question that changed the atmosphere of that space from judgment to personal conviction. And then Jesus said to her, after no one threw a stone at her, he said, "I neither condemn you nor do they." What could happen in the world that we live in if we presented ourselves in this way? I know that I have been guilty of holding certain things that I think are greater sins above others. And it goes back to what we talked about in the last episode about blaming instead of bravery. It's easy for me to not really confess. And that's where I talked about Jesus is willing to wash our feet if we confess, but we don't want to. We don't want to confess that we've made a mistake or that we're a mess or that we're unkind or unloving or that we, made that mistake that was a conviction for us, because we want to just point at other people and say, well, they're worse than me. She's way worse than me, so I must be just totally fine. But that is back again to a TikTok, Instagram, social media world where we're looking to others instead of listening inside. I think that we're numbing out the opportunities that the Spirit gives us when we feel having feelings. Hopefully, you've taken the time we talked about last week, the 2 minutes every day to just listen. In those 2 minutes, I think we get access to our feelings. And we don't feel our feelings very much in our culture. We think that we are depressed or anxious and I'm not saying that you're not, okay? I've struggled with all of this, do struggle with all of this. But I find most of the time that these triggers of emotions are things that need to be healed in me. They're symptoms of an underlying condition. Repentance is the answer. And not always. There are times that other things need to happen. But a lot of times, you guys, I walk around looking for someone to tell me that I'm okay instead of just confessing something that I did that I know is wrong. So I'm going to give you a personal example. I'm trying to think of one that's not going to hurt somebody else in the path. My goodness. I got quite a few rumbling at the tip of my tongue, but what one is going to be the most beneficial? I'm going to give this example. I hope she's not listening. If she is, I hope she understands. We recently had a young mother and her son live with us. And to the naked eye, that looked like a huge sacrifice, that I would open the doors of my home to someone so different than me and put someone in my household and take care of them and allow them to live here. So others look at me and think I could never do that. That creates a place where people feel like perhaps I'm better than them, or we measure that. Or I've even had clients that felt guilty. I have someone in my life who's autistic, and I wouldn't even really, I don't even like to go out with them, let alone let them live with me, because they can be embarrassing or all these things. And so I could call that good enough because it looks good. I was doing the right thing. But there was a new call that God asked me to in my quiet time, which was to love another person in this situation who I had already deemed unworthy of love. And I kept it to myself. God called me in my quiet time repeatedly the name of this person to reach out to them and love them. But I had decided that the line was drawn for me. I had done enough work for the Lord. People had seen it, people knew, and I was taking the acclimates or the acknowledgement from other people, and that was filling me temporarily, you guys, to feel like, yeah, I have done enough. Look at other people aren't doing this, and I was justifying something. Meanwhile, I was being ate up inside and feeling very anxious and also very angry. So remember, we talked about last time proactive thinking and reactive thinking. All the things that kept bubbling up, like that I think are Holy Spirit prompts, like, hey, you should invite that person over for dinner. I push it right back down, and I would list off all the reasons that didn't need to happen, and I would tell God all the things I'd already done for him, and perhaps he should move on and ask somebody else to do it. And then I became angry and bitter, and the root of that began to make me anxious. I felt paranoid about, certain things with this person. And that was a hidden conviction. Does that make sense? Where if I would have confessed that to God right away instead of looking for the approval of man and just been like, can you help me, Lord, to do what you're asking me to do? Because I don't feel, to be totally honest, like I want to do that. I don't feel like I want to do that, Lord. I don't feel like that person is worthy of my time. And I feel like it's yucky and I don't want to. That's okay. Do you know that's okay to say? You can wrestle out. The Lord knows all the thoughts you're having anyways. The Bible tells us that he knows even a thought before it's formed on our tongue. So it's okay if we say it out loud to him because he's waiting to wash us clean and to refresh us. That's what I think about twofold on the washing of the feet, is that not only does it cleanse us, it humbles us to have someone see us dirty, and it refreshes us so that we can go out and do the work. And so there are things inside of us that we don't want to acknowledge. And so we ask others, do you think it's okay if I don't invite them? Do you think it, all the while, the prompting's already been for us. So this goes back to that quiet time we talked about in the last episode, is if I'm quiet, if I'm still, the plans and purpose for my life will be brought to me. And then if I'm brave enough instead of blaming enough, I'll act into that. And then the restoration work of God will be seen to me and to others. But when I'm just bragging, and I don't want to say I was bragging, I like to share my life, but all of us, whether some of us are more vulnerable than others, you guys see me and think I'm vulnerable because I share these stories. The truth is that there are tons of times I don't share the whole part because all of us are living out the reality that we don't always share the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And so I think this really important work of slowing down and listening, that we become the love of Jesus, that we draw others to this love, that we are not judgmental or harsh, that we aren't in the work, even if the whole world. So at that time, the culture was that a woman would be stoned if she did what this woman had done. And that was the culture and the norm. And all of the people who loved Jesus and the people who didn't love Jesus were all there to see this woman have that ramification. And Jesus said, no, 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 no. Because he knows that we all struggle, that inside of all of us is some hurt, habit, or hang up. And he asks us to continue to walk alongside. And if you're asking, he'll show you who. And if you're asking, he'll show you you. And all the while, we'll begin to continue to transform into the likeness and love of Jesus. But if you are following Jesus, or say you are, and you are not loving, you are not forgiving, you are harsh, you are quick to judge, I want to show you in my Bible study, here are some ways for us to wash the feet of others. Show genuine love for others in practical ways. Defer to one another in humility. Forgive one another. Strengthen one another to overcome sin and bear one another's burdens. Consider the needs of others and do what leads you to peace and edification. Pray for one another and encourage one another. I hope today this was encouraging to you. I hope you know that you are not alone in your sin, that you are worthy of having your feet washed, that you are lovable, that you are full of light and love. And I hope you know that I love you, because I do. I don't even know you, but I think you're pretty awesome. And there's a little truth. Maybe a few of you I won't, but God does, and he'll show us how to love you better. Thanks for tuning in. I guess this is where I ask you to subscribe to my channel, to follow me on social, and to listen wherever podcasts can be found. And join me every Tuesday at 2 as we unpack how to heal your hair, your heart, and your happiness.